Welcome back to History Relearned. In this episode, we're going to be looking at how healthcare in England changed during the reign of Henry VIII. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and supporting the channel. In this video, we look at the beginnings of a college that would eventually be known as the Royal College of Physicians. On the 23rd of March 1518, King Henry VIII granted a royal charter to a new college, one whose purpose was to ensure good and lawful practice in the art of medicine for the common weal and profit of this realm, whereby the standard of physicians should be raised and become better regulated. Anyone could set up as an apothecary, surgeon, or physician, without any checks on their competence. Another was the cost of treatment. Its formal name was the Worshipful Company of the College of Physicians in London, but it has been known simply as the Royal College of Physicians since 1934. Most members were graduates of Cambridge, Oxford, or one of the two Inns of Court, although it appears that degrees in law or divinity were not acceptable. First was the growth of towns and cities, which meant that more people lived in close proximity to each other and were more likely to catch infectious diseases. Part of the reason was that the first warden, Richard Manningham, was unable to enforce its provisions. For example, he wanted to prevent apothecaries from selling medicines without a prescription from a licensed physician. But in 1524, it moved to the London home of William Buck, who was a Justice of the Common Pleas. The original 4-year term of office for the first warden, Richard Manningham, was extended indefinitely. Initially, it had been about ensuring the availability of healthcare and medicines. Many of the public still referred to doctors as physicians, and doctors often described themselves as physicians. It was until the National Health Service was formed in the aftermath of the Second World War that the term physician became less commonly used in favor of doctor. But by the 19th century, it had become more about maintaining standards and providing advice to government. The word pharmacopoeia comes via the Greek pharmakon, meaning drug or poison, and poema. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting the channel. Thanks again for watching. It's essentially a list of medicines and the formula for each one. At the time, the apothecaries were given the responsibility of producing medicines according to the recipes in the pharmac. Today, the British Pharmacopoeia is published by the Department of Health and Social Care. The European Pharmacopoeia is produced by the European Directorate for the Quality of Medicines and Healthcare, and the United States Pharmacopoeia is published by the United States Pharmacopoeial Convention. The current website states that the Royal College of Physicians of London is the oldest medical royal college in the world, but he died on January 1547. His son, Edward VI, was king after him, followed by Mary Tudor, who was succeeded by Elizabeth I in November 1558. Elizabeth's reign lasted until her death in March 1603, when James VI of Scotland came to the throne that year. The title of the college changed from the College of Physicians in London to the Royal College of Physicians in recognition of its royal charter. It doesn't actually state that it's the oldest in the world, but it does state that it's the oldest medical royal college in the United Kingdom. In 1824, the college purchased a site near Hyde Park, and the foundation stone was laid in June 1825. The building was designed by the architect, Decimus Burton, and officially opened the 18th of December 1828. The Times newspaper reported that the attendance was numerous and respectable. The chair was occupied by Sir Thomas Watson Bart, MD FRCP Warden, and the opening speech was made by Sir William Knight. Manningham had originally been appointed for 4 years, because Henry was wary of granting too much power to a single individual. However, the charter did allow for the appointment of 2 deputy wardens, John Knott and William Chedworth, both of whom were physicians. However, the London apothecaries complained that this would ruin their business and the price of medicines would rise. In the end, Manningham agreed that apothecaries could continue to sell medicines without a prescription, but he introduced a requirement that medicines had to be registered with the college before they could be sold. Then there was the small matter of the 2 recent plagues. The Bishop of London opposed the college because he felt that it would infringe upon the rights of the clergy to practice medicine. In the event, however, he was overruled. On May 1523, a further charter was granted confirming the powers of the college. This was at the request of Catherine of Aragon's brother, who was the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. The first had struck London in 1510, killing around 25% of the population, while the second had arrived 4 years later and killed around 10%. Finally, there was the matter of the approaching royal wedding. Membership was restricted to men only, and it wasn't until 1947 that women were admitted. Henry was planning to marry Catherine of Aragon, the daughter of the Spanish king, Ferdinand and Isabella. She was due to arrive in England in 1509, so it was important that everything was done to ensure her good health. He also had to prove that he had studied medicine abroad, usually in Italy, France, or Spain, and had to present to English and to foreign physicians as referees. Then he had to swear an oath to practice medicine according to the best of his ability and to keep secret all that he learned during his training was necessary for the health and the safeguard of his patient. After that, he paid a fee of 40 shillings and received his certificate. This had to be renewed every 5 years, costing 10 shillings each time. The charter defined the boundaries between the roles of the various medical practitioners. Only those registered as physicians could prescribe medicines, while surgeons were restricted to setting bones and treating wounds. The charter also made it illegal for anyone other than an apothecary to sell medicines. It created a monopoly for them. These restrictions had a major impact on those practicing medicine. A surgeon, for example, could only treat wounds and fractures. He could not treat illnesses in the same way a physician could. He also could not treat illnesses using medicines because only an apothecary could sell them. This led some to refer to surgeons as hacks, because they were effectively only treating cuts or wounds. As the price of foodstuffs rose during the 16th century, so too did the prices of medicines, which apothecaries were generally able to charge because of the lack of competition. Yet another issue was the problem of fake medicines. Since there was no regulation, some apothecaries sold worthless remedies. There were calls for change, including from the leading English physician, Thomas Lineker, who was concerned about the low quality of teaching in some Italian universities and the lack of proper training of some physicians in England. He visited Henry VIII and suggested that the king establish a college of physicians. It aimed to establish one general standard of medicine across England and Wales. But why was it needed? How did it impact those practicing medicine? And how has its role evolved over time? In the late Middle Ages and into the 16th century, there were various groups of practitioners who dealt with medical issues. There was no real standardization. For example, barbers performed bloodletting and setting of bones, while surgeons worked alongside apothecaries and were involved in dispensing medicines. Apothecaries were also involved in treating illnesses and injuries. Then there were the midwives, some of whom were women, of lower social status. Physicians were generally higher on the societal rungs than most. They were expected to have a classical education and to have studied in Italy or France, among other places. They were generally not involved in surgery and instead focused on treatments such as bloodletting and the use of medicines. However, there were several problems with this system. One was the lack of regulation. So when Henry VIII granted a charter to the College of Physicians in 1518, he was aiming to fix some of these issues. In order to be registered as a physician, a man had to be at least 26 years old and to have a bachelor's degree. There are a few reasons why this charter may have been granted. It wasn't all plain sailing, however, although the charter was granted in 1518. It took 7 years for the college to come into being. Another reason for the delay was the opposition from some senior figures. The headquarters of the new college was initially a private house belonging to a former mayor of London, Richard Pitt. In the early years, membership was restricted. Over time, more and more members were admitted, peaking in the 19th century when there were 1491 members. Over the centuries, the role of the college changed as the needs of society changed. While the focus had shifted, the work of the early physicians was still important and remains relevant today. One of the legacies of the early Royal College of Physicians can be seen in the Apothecaries Act of 1523, which saw the introduction of the pharmacopoeia. Henry VIII granted the charter to the Royal College of Physicians in 1580, but what about the actual building? That came later. What do you think? Did the Royal College of Physicians have a positive impact, or was it more of a hindrance? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know the public's opinion on this. If you can check out the links in the description, it would help me out, and I thank you kindly for doing so. But right now we need to understand how Henry VIII improved England's water supply and sanitation, improving lives in England and by extension, the whole world. So it's no secret that life in Tudor times was not easy. The average person could expect to live only 35 years, with most dying in childhood. Diseases ran rampant, killing thousands each year. London was filthy and smelled terrible, so nothing new. People shared bedrooms with animals, and chamber pots were a way of life. However, Henry VIII tried to change this. Henry's first concern was with London, which at this time was the largest city in England. In 1531, Parliament passed an act for the health and better government of the City of London. This act made it illegal to throw rubbish into the streets or rivers and ordered all shops and businesses to close at 8 p.m. to reduce the amount of people in the streets at night. These acts didn't have much effect. Though Londoners were fined for breaking the rules, these fines were just a means for the government to raise money. Another way Henry tried to improve the lives of Londoners was through the installation of public water supplies. The first public fountain in London was installed in 1532 in the churchyard of St. Michael's, Crooked Lane. This was followed by others around the city. Unfortunately, these fountains were never enough to keep up with demand. The reason for this was because most of the water used in London came from the River Thames. The river supplied water for drinking, cleaning, washing clothes, and even for use in industrial processes. The only problem was that the river was heavily polluted. Most of London's wastewater went into the river, and the river was also used for disposing of human waste. To make matters worse, London's population had increased significantly since the Black Death. The plague had killed so many people that when the population began to rise again, there weren't enough resources to go around. After the passing of the 1531 Act, Henry VIII attempted to address this issue. He granted a monopoly to a man named William Prynne to provide London with fresh water from a spring in a village called Tottenham. While this did help, it wasn't enough. It was then decided that a new source of water was needed. A group of French engineers was brought in to assess the situation, and they decided that the best place to build a waterworks would be near the village of Bag, where there were several springs. Construction began in 1543 and took 4 years to complete. On July 1547, Henry VIII died and never saw the finished project, but his daughter, Princess Elizabeth, attended the opening of the new river in 1547. She became Queen Elizabeth I in 1558 and continued to expand the water supply in London. But back to Henry VIII, how exactly did the new river work? Water from the springs near Bagneg was channeled through 25 miles of lead pipes and distributed throughout London. The water flowed into the city through what is now Islington and passed under the middle of London Bridge. From here, it flowed over the south side of the bridge to the west, where it emptied into the River Thames near Southwark Bridge. Houses along the route had taps attached to the pipework so that they could fill up containers with fresh water. Public fountains were also built at various points around the city. The entire project was a success, but it was very expensive. The original cost of the project was estimated to be around £3,000, which was a huge amount of money at the time. However, the value of the currency has depreciated over time, so the modern equivalent would be millions of pounds or dollars. This expense was covered by taxes and tolls collected from those who used the water supply. The price varied depending on the amount of water needed. Businesses had to pay more than private citizens. Henry VIII also tried to improve the sanitation of London. One of his advisors wrote to him in 1532 about the filth in the gutters and the smell from the rotting waste. As mentioned earlier, Henry responded to this by passing an act which made it illegal to throw rubbish into the streets or rivers. However, this didn't stop people from throwing their chamber pots out of their window. Chamber pots were a common sight in Tudor homes. They were usually made from wood or metal and were used for both urination and defecation. When they were full, they were then taken to the street and the contents were emptied out. Another way that Henry tried to improve London's sanitation was by building public toilets called common queues. They were installed in churches, and some were free to use, while others required a small fee to be paid. However, common queues were often dirty and smelled terrible. Furthermore, not everyone in London lived near a church. Still, these were some of the first public conveniences in London, and they helped somewhat to alleviate the problem. As the city grew and developed, the once clean new river became polluted once again. The influx of water had initially diluted the waste in the Thames, but as more people moved to London, the river became polluted once again. Even the public fountains were affected. By 1540, the water in the fountains had become so dirty that it was used for washing instead of drinking. To try and combat this, Henry VIII created a new office called the Master of the Wards. It was the job of the Master of the Wards to see that the water supply remained clean, to punish anyone who polluted it. Despite these efforts, though nothing was done to improve the sanitation of London, it wasn't until the 19th century that major improvements were made to the sewage system. It's easy to judge the Tudors for their lack of sanitation and healthcare. We live in a time where we are so advanced and fortunate to have such things, but it's important to remember that the ideas of public health and safety were not popular at the time. It was normal for people to die from illness and disease. In fact, it was expected. Life was hard and dangerous, and death could come at any time. However, Henry VIII did try to change this, and I think that's worth remembering. While he may not have been successful in completely cleaning up London, he did introduce some of the first public utilities, and he gave his people access to clean water. For this, He should be commended. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to be notified of future content. Thank you for watching. Say hi in the comments if you're not too shy.